So William starts replacing the judges in the common law system with judges who are loyal to his ideology and not loyal to the common law. He starts using those judges to enforce his foreign law on the people of Great Britain contrary to their common law. He starts chasing the landowners off of their land through threat and force itself, sometimes literally running them completely out of the kingdom and then seizing their abandoned land and handing it over to his foreign friends. How else do you keep foreign law in a kingdom if it's not full of people who like the foreign law better than the common law? He starts replacing the leadership in the churches with leaders who are loyal to the ideology of the king, not to the word of God, and willing to do whatever the king says, even when it's contrary to God's word. This goes on for about 40 years. William has had 4 sons. He and his first son don't get along. His first son tries to murder him. Now, when you're the son of the king and you've unsuccessfully attempted to murder the king, you're not sticking around in the kingdom. He runs off to the Holy Land, fights in the Crusades. He's no longer in the line for the throne. William's second son is killed in an accident, leaving his 2 younger sons heir to the throne, William II and Henry I. William II takes the throne, and history records that William II is an evil, wicked king. Now, William rules for a short while until one day, William and his little brother Henry I decide to go hunting together. And William II is killed in a mysterious hunting accident. When a stray arrow from his little brother's hunting party accidentally kills him, coincidentally catapulting Henry to the throne. Now, you think this is an accident? Well, neither did the people of Great Britain. The bad news is for Henry that when you live in a kingdom and you're not satisfied with the legitimacy of the king, it's not like you start a recall petition or find a candidate to run against him in the next election. When you are a king and the people do not accept your legitimacy to be king, the only option you have is the people are going to revolt and start chopping off heads. Oddly enough, Henry is fond of his head. He starts making promises to the people in order to appease them so he can keep the throne and his head at the same time. The first thing Henry promises is that he's going to marry an Anglo-Saxon woman. Now, the Anglo-Saxons are the majority of the population in Great Britain. Now, his advisors are obviously very astute, because what they figured out is they can appease the majority of the people by giving them representation on the throne. How does that work? Well, if you're Anglo-Saxon and you have an Anglo-Saxon queen on the throne, you have to know that some benefits and privileges are coming your way, right? She's going to make sure that the Anglo-Saxon people are favored above all people. And so the advisors have figured out that we can appease the majority of the population with the expectation of what they're going to get from the government. Henry then promises, I will do an investigation to determine whether I'm at fault for the death of my brother or not. They call it a grand tribunal. How do you suppose that works out when the government investigates itself? Sort of like the Department of Justice investigating Eric Holder or IRS or Benghazi or anything, right? The conclusions are exactly the same. Henry is not at fault for the death of his brother, and he is fit to be king. But the people did not believe the veracity of this investigation either. So Henry makes one final promise, the most important promise that Henry's going to make. Henry promises and signs the first document in what I call the genealogy of our Constitution. It took 700 years to write our Constitution, and there are 5 documents that were written over those 700 years that are so important. It'd be just like somebody going in time and killing your great-great-grandfather. You would not be here. Any one of these 5 documents not existing, Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, would not look anything like it does. It may not even exist. This first document is called the 1100 Charter of Liberties. In this 1100 Charter of Liberties, Henry promises that kings will no longer be evil and oppressive. Ever. And the interesting thing is, Henry makes a list of 14 things that kings can't ever do ever again, because if they do them, they'll be evil and oppressive. Now, I'm sure we could come up with a longer list, but I appreciate what Henry's done, because I think that if a king recognizes that a government is evil and oppressive, that should be something that's a no-brainer for us today, right? He's given us a test. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole 14 things, but I do want to share one of them with you. Henry says, if any of my baron or earls shall die, his heirs shall not be forced to purchase their inheritance, but shall retrieve it through force of law and custom. Because Henry was remarking that when the heirs of an estate have to purchase their estate from the government before they can receive it, that's an evil and oppressive government. So how is it that a king in 1100, who has no responsibility to the people whatsoever, recognizes that an inheritance tax is the earmark of an evil and oppressive government, and our government simply calls it revenue? Because we don't know what liberty is. And apparently a king knew more about liberty in 1100 than we do today. Now, Henry is not interested in liberty, he's interested in keeping his head. But he has signed and sealed this promise that will take hold and be in effect forever. And the people of Great Britain are going to need this in 100 years, because in 100 years they're going to have the most evil king, as history reports, they will ever have. His name is John. John is a massive taxation king. As a matter of fact, if you cannot pay your taxes in John's kingdom, which is highly likely, you are arrested, you are thrown into prison, you are mutilated. He's cutting off hands and feet and ears and tongues for not paying their taxes. And if you're lucky, you're simply executed. They said he was vicious and ruthless. You guys know John, by the way, you probably don't realize it. Ever heard of a guy named Robin Hood? That's the king in the Robin Hood stories. Somebody shout out real quick, what is Robin Hood's claim to fame?
Robbing from the rich and giving.
Rob to rich and give to the poor. Well, that's what we're taught, but it's not true. Robin Hood was not robbing from the rich and giving to the poor in an effort to redistribute wealth. Robin Hood was taking from the king and the crown the money that had been stolen from the people through oppressive taxation and returning it to the people so they could live. Remember, John is going to murder you if you cannot pay your taxes. Robin Hood is not putting everybody on equal financial footing. He is giving people their lives back. Something else interesting about John's day, murdering people for not paying their taxes was not enough to cause the people to revolt. Because you see, when people only have a prosperity focus, when they're only worried about balanced budgets, when they're only worried about job numbers and what they can get in their hand or what they have in their hand, history proves that in those circumstances, with those priorities, tyrants will always be able to trickle down just enough to make them a slave.